The night was cold and dark when Samuel Carter walked through the cargo docks of New Boston Orbital Freight Terminal. He was 53 years old, and his back hurt from years of lifting heavy boxes. His hair was mostly gray now, and his hands were rough from work. He had been doing this job for 30 years, and he knew every corner of these docks like he knew his own small apartment dot. It was November in the year 2147. The stars outside the station windows looked the same as they always did. Ships came and went. Cargo moved from one place to another. Samuel did his work quietly, never complaining, never asking for more than his small paycheck. He lived alone. He had never married. He had no children. His life was simple and quiet, and he had accepted that this was how things would always be. On this particular night, Samuel was walking past Dock 7 when he heard a sound. It was soft, almost like a small animal crying. He stopped and listened. The sound came again from behind a stack of shipping containers. Samuel looked around. No one else was nearby. The other workers were on the far side of the terminal. He walked slowly toward the containers. The crying sound grew louder. When he turned the corner, he saw something that made him stop breathing for a moment. A child was sitting on the cold metal floor. But this was not a human child. Her skin was silver, like polished metal under moonlight. Her eyes were large and violet, filled with tears. She was very thin, and her clothes were torn and dirty. She could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old by human standards. Samuel knew what she was. He had seen pictures on the news. She was Valorian, from a planet far away that had been destroyed by war. The Dominion War had killed millions of her people. Those who survived had become refugees, scattered across the galaxy, looking for safety. The child looked up at Samuel with fear in her violet eyes. She tried to move away, pressing her back against the cold container. She was shaking, and Samuel could see that she had not eaten in a long time. Her silver skin looked dull and unhealthy. Samuel did not know what to do at first. He knew he should call security. There were rules about stowaways. There were procedures to follow. But as he looked at this small, frightened creature, he could not make himself reach for his communicator dot. Instead, he slowly took off his old jacket. It was worn and faded, but it was warm. He held it out toward the child, moving very slowly so he would not scare her more. "It is okay," he said softly. "I will not hurt you." The child did not understand his words. Her people spoke a different language. But she understood his voice. She understood the kindness in his eyes. After a long moment, she let him put the jacket around her thin shoulders. Samuel sat down on the floor across from her. He opened his lunch bag and took out the food he had brought for himself. There was bread, some cheese, and a small container of soup that was still warm. He held it out to her. The child looked at the food, then at Samuel, then at the food again. Her hunger won over her fear. She took the soup and began to drink it quickly, like someone who had not eaten in days. Samuel watched her and felt something break inside his heart. "Slow down," he said gently. "There is more. You do not have to rush." She finished the soup and ate the bread and cheese. When she was done, some color had returned to her silver skin. Her violet eyes looked at Samuel with something new. It was not fear anymore. It was wonder. Samuel did not know how to talk to her, but he stayed with her until his break was over. Then he hid her in a storage room that no one used anymore. He brought her blankets and more food. He told her to stay quiet and wait for him. "I will come back," he said, even though she could not understand. "I promise." He went back to work, but his mind was not on the cargo anymore. He thought about the child. He thought about what would happen to her if security found her. They would send her to a detention center. They would process her like cargo. She would be alone and scared. surrounded by strangers who did not care about her. Samuel could not let that happen. The next day, he came back to the storage room. The child was still there, wrapped in the blankets he had given her. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it changed her whole face. Samuel felt warm inside when he saw it. He brought her food every day for 3 days. He learned that her name was Veleth Kira. A translator device he borrowed from a friend helped them talk a little. She told him that her family was gone. Her mother had died in the war. Her father had put her on a ship, hoping she would find safety, but the ship had been attacked. She had hidden in a cargo container and somehow ended up here. "I have nowhere to go," she said through the translator. Her voice was small and sad. Samuel learned that there were refugee camps on Mars. Valorian survivors were gathering there, trying to rebuild their lives. It was the only place where Veleth might find her people again. But passage to Mars cost money. 4,000 credits, to be exact. Samuel went home that night and looked at his bank account. He had exactly 4,000 credits. It was everything he had saved in 30 years of work. It was his security, his safety net, his future. If something went wrong with his health, if he lost his job, if anything bad happened, that money was all he had. He thought about it for a long time. He sat in his small apartment and looked at the numbers on his screen. 4,000 credits. 30 years of careful saving. Everything he owned. Then he thought about Veleth. He thought about her violet eyes and her small smile. He thought about her sitting alone in that cold storage room, waiting for someone to help her. Samuel made his decision. The next morning, he went to the transit office and bought a ticket to Mars. 1 passenger. One way. 4,000 credits. The clerk looked at him strangely when he paid in full, but Samuel did not explain. He took the ticket and walked back to the docks. When he gave the ticket to Veleth, she did not understand at first. He used the translator to explain. He told her that she was going to Mars. He told her that she would find her people there. He told her that everything would be okay. The child looked at the ticket, then at Samuel. Her violet eyes filled with tears again, but these were different tears. These were tears of gratitude, of hope, of something she had not felt since the war began. "Why?" she asked through the translator. "Why do you help me?" Samuel knelt down so he could look into her eyes. He was just a cargo worker. He was nobody special. He had no power, no wealth, no importance. But he had 4,000 credits, and he had a choice about how to use them. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "And I could give it." It was not a complicated answer. It was not a grand philosophy. It was just the truth. Samuel Carter was a simple man who saw a child in need and did what he could to help. He did not think about rewards. He did not expect anything in return. He just did what felt right. And that simple choice would change the course of history in ways he could never imagine. The morning of the departure came too quickly. Samuel had not slept well the night before. He kept thinking about the little Valorian girl and wondering if he had made the right choice. 4,000 credits was everything he had. But when he remembered her smile, he knew he would do it again. He woke up early and put on his cleanest clothes. They were not fancy, just a simple shirt and pants, but he wanted to look nice for her last day. He packed some food for her journey and walked to the docks as the artificial sun began to light up the station. Veleth was waiting for him in the storage room. She had tried to clean herself up as best she could. Her silver skin looked a little healthier now after 3 days of eating real food. She was wearing his old jacket, which was much too big for her small body. The sleeves hung past her hands, and the bottom reached almost to her knees. Samuel smiled when he saw her. She looked like a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes. But there was something serious in her violet eyes. She knew that today was important. She knew that everything was about to change. Are you ready? Samuel asked through the translator device. Velith nodded slowly. I am scared, she admitted. That is okay, Samuel said. Being scared is normal. But you are brave. You have survived so much already. You will be okay. They walked together through the docks toward the departure gate. A few workers looked at them curiously, but no one stopped them. Samuel had his worker badge, and Velith had her ticket. Everything was legal and proper. The gate for the Mars transport was busy with travelers. Most of them were humans going to work in the Martian colonies. A few were aliens of different species. No one paid much attention to the old cargo worker and the small Valorian girl. A volunteer translator was working at the gate, helping refugees who did not speak English. She was a young woman with kind eyes and brown hair. Her name tag said Lisa. When she saw Samuel and Velith, she came over to help. Is this your daughter? Lisa asked Samuel. No, Samuel said. I am just helping her get to the refugee camps. She has no family left. Lisa looked at Velith with sympathy. She knelt down and spoke to the child in Valorian. Velith answered quietly, and Lisa translated for Samuel. She says you saved her life, Lisa said. She says you gave her food and shelter when she had nothing. She wants to know why you did it. Samuel looked at Velith. Her violet eyes were fixed on his face, waiting for his answer. He did not know how to explain something that seemed so simple to him. Because no child should be hungry, he said finally. No child should be alone if someone can help. I saw her and I helped her. That is all. Lisa translated his words. Velith listened carefully, and something changed in her expression. It was like she was memorizing his words, storing them somewhere deep inside her heart, where she would never forget them. The boarding announcement came over the speakers. It was time for Velith to go. Samuel felt a sudden tightness in his chest. He had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, he did not want to let her go. Velith seemed to feel the same way. She reached out and grabbed his hand, holding it tightly. Her small silver fingers were cool against his rough human skin. Will I see you again? She asked through Lisa. Samuel wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise that they would meet again someday. But he was an honest man, and he could not make a promise he might not be able to keep. The universe is very large, he said gently. I do not know if we will meet again, but I hope you will have a good life. I hope you will be happy. That is what I want for you. Velith's eyes filled with tears. She let go of his hand and reached into the pocket of the jacket she was wearing. She pulled out something small and held it out to him. It was a crystal pendant on a thin silver chain. The crystal was not valuable by galactic standards. It was a common stone that could be found on many planets. But it was beautiful in its own simple way, catching the light and breaking it into tiny rainbows. This was my mother's, Velith said through Lisa. It is the only thing I have left from her. I want you to have it. Samuel shook his head. I cannot take this. It is too important to you. But Velith pressed the pendant into his palm and closed his fingers around it. She looked up at him with determination in her violet eyes. You remember me, she said. These words she spoke in English, slowly and carefully. She had been practicing them. Samuel felt tears forming in his own eyes. He was not a man who cried easily, but something about this moment broke through all his defenses. He knelt down and hugged the small girl gently. I will remember you, he promised. Always. The final boarding call came. Velith pulled away from his hug and picked up the small bag of food he had packed for her. She walked toward the boarding gate, then stopped and looked back at him one more time. Samuel raised his hand in farewell. Velith raised hers. Then she turned and walked through the gate, disappearing into the crowd of passengers. Samuel stood there for a long time, watching the gate even after she was gone. Lisa, the translator, came and stood beside him. "That was a very kind thing you did," she said quietly. "It was nothing," Samuel said. "No," Lisa said firmly. "It was not nothing. You gave her hope. You showed her that there is still good in the universe. That is worth more than you know." Samuel did not answer. He just watched as the transport ship outside the window began to power up its engines. The lights blinked on one by one. The ship lifted slowly from the dock and turned toward the star's dot. He watched until the ship was just a tiny point of light in the distance. Then he watched until even that light disappeared. Only then did he finally turn and walk away. He went back to his small apartment and hung the crystal pendant above his bed. It caught the light from his window and threw tiny rainbows across the ceiling. He looked at it for a long time before finally going to sleep. The next night, Samuel returned to work at the docks. No one knew what he had done. No one asked about the money that was no longer in his account. He did not tell anyone. He just did his job like he always did, moving cargo from one place to another. The weeks passed. The months passed. The years passed. Samuel grew older. His hair turned completely white. His joints began to ache more and more. He retired from the cargo docks when he was 65 and took a part-time job at a small bookshop because his pension was not enough to live on. But every night, before he went to sleep, he looked at the crystal pendant hanging above his bed. He thought about the little silver-skinned girl with the violet eyes. He wondered where she was. He wondered if she was safe. He wondered if she was happy. He never tried to find out. He did not want to intrude on her life. He had helped her when she needed help, and that was enough. He did not need thanks. He did not need recognition. He just hoped, with all his heart, that she had found peace. Sometimes, late at night, he would hold the pendant in his rough old hands and remember her words. "You remember me." He would smile sadly and whisper to the empty room. "I remember you, Velith. I hope you are well. I hope you are happy. I hope you found your people." The crystal would sparkle in the dim light, almost like it was answering him. And Samuel would feel, just for a moment, that she was thinking of him too. Then he would hang the pendant back up, close his eyes, and dream of stars. He had no idea that across the galaxy, in places he could not imagine, his name was becoming a legend. He had no idea that a small act of kindness was growing into something much larger than he ever dreamed possible. Samuel Carter was just a simple man who had helped a child in need. That was all he knew. That was all he thought he would ever be. But the universe had other plans. 30 years had passed since that cold night on the docks of New Boston. The universe had changed in many ways during that time. Wars had ended. New alliances had formed. Species that had once been enemies now worked together in peace. The Valorian people had survived the Dominion War. It had not been easy. Millions had died. Their homeworld had been devastated. But they had refused to give up. They had fought back with everything they had, and slowly, year by year, they had rebuilt what was lost. And at the center of this great recovery was a woman named Velith, Kira. She stood now in the grand chamber of the Sovereign Palace on the restored Valorian homeworld. She was 42 years old, tall and strong, with silver skin that gleamed like polished metal under the soft lights. Her violet eyes were still large and bright, but they held a wisdom now that came from years of struggle and triumph. She wore robes of deep purple and silver, the colors of her office. A crown of woven metal sat upon her head. She was no longer the frightened child who had hidden behind cargo containers. She was High Sovereign Velith Kira, ruler of the Valorian Accord, leader of 12 star systems, and one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Her journey had been long and difficult. When she arrived at the refugee camps on Mars, all those years ago, she had been alone and afraid. But she had carried something precious with her. Not money, not weapons, not political connections. She had carried the memory of kindness. A human had helped her when she had nothing. A stranger had given her everything he had. That simple truth had burned inside her like a fire that could not be put out. In the refugee camps, Velith had refused to be helpless. She studied hard. She learned new languages. She trained her body and her mind. When she was old enough, she joined the Valorian resistance and fought to take back her homeworld. She was brave in battle. She was clever in strategy. But what made her different from other commanders was her treatment of prisoners and refugees. She remembered what it felt like to be lost and alone. She remembered what it meant when someone showed kindness. She made sure that everyone under her command treated others with dignity and compassion. The soldiers who served under her began to tell stories. They spoke of a commander who had been saved by human kindness. They spoke of a debt that could never be repaid. The story spread from camp to camp, from ship to ship, from planet to planet. When the war finally ended, the Valorian people needed a leader. They were divided into many clans, each with its own traditions and politics. Many powerful figures wanted to take control. But the common people, the survivors and refugees who had suffered the most, they wanted Velith Kira. They wanted the woman who understood suffering. They wanted the leader who believed in kindness. They wanted the commander who had been saved by a human and who had never forgotten that gift. The political leaders tried to resist at first. Velith was young. She had no noble blood. She had no family connections. But the voice of the people was too strong. One by one, the clans agreed to support her. One by one, the old powers bent their knees. Velith Kira became High Sovereign at the age of 30. In the 12 years since then, she had united her people in ways that no one thought possible. She had formed alliances with other species. She had built schools and hospitals and trade networks. She had turned the Valorian Accord into a force for peace and prosperity in the galaxy. But she had never forgotten the old man on the docks. In her private chambers, away from the crowds and the politicians and the endless demands of leadership, Velith kept a small shrine. It held only one thing, a holographic image that her archivists had spent years finding and reconstructing. The image showed a tired human man with gray hair and rough hands. He was kneeling on a metal floor, offering a cup of soup to someone outside the frame. His face was gentle and kind. His eyes held no expectation of reward. Velith looked at this image often. Sometimes she talked to it, telling the man about her day, about her struggles, about her victories. She knew he could not hear her. She knew he probably did not even remember her. But it helped her stay connected to the truth of who she was. "You saved me," she would whisper to the image. "You gave me everything, and you asked for nothing." I will never forget. The story of Samuel Carter had become famous throughout Valorian space. They called it the parable of the kind human. Teachers told it to children in schools. Philosophers discussed its meaning in great debates. Artists created paintings and songs and poems about the old cargo worker who had given his savings to save an alien child. It was more than just a story to the Valorian people. It was proof that kindness existed in the universe. It was evidence that not all strangers were enemies. It was hope that different species could care for one another. Some people said the story was exaggerated. Some said it was just a myth. But Velith knew the truth. She had been there. She had felt his jacket around her shoulders. She had tasted his soup. She had seen the love in his eyes when he said goodbye. Now, after 30 years, Velith had finally decided to find him. She called her most trusted advisor, an old Valorian named Korath, who had been with her since the war. He came to her private chambers and listened as she explained what she wanted. Find him, she said. "Find the human who saved me. I want to know where he is. I want to know if he is still alive. I want to see him again." Korath nodded slowly. "It will not be easy, Sovereign. 30 years is a long time. Records from that era are incomplete. The man may have died. He may have moved. He may not want to be found." "I know," Velas said, "but I must try. I have waited long enough. I have accomplished much in my life, Korath. I have united our people. I have built an empire. But none of it means anything if I cannot thank the man who made it all possible." Korath bowed his head. "I will begin the search immediately." The investigation took months. Korath assembled a team of the best researchers in the Accord. They searched through old cargo manifests, employment records, transit logs, and security footage. They traced every clue, no matter how small. Finally, after many dead ends and false leads, they found him. Samuel Carter, former cargo handler at New Boston Orbital Freight Terminal. Currently 83 years old. Living alone in a small apartment in New Boston. Working part-time at a bookshop called The Paper Moon, because his pension was not enough to cover his expenses. Korath brought the report to Velas in person. He watched as she read it, as tears formed in her violet eyes. "He is alive," she whispered. "After all this time, he is still alive." "Yes, Sovereign," Korath said. "But the report also says that he is not in good health. He's old and poor. He has no family. He does not know that he is famous across 12 star systems." Velas was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the holographic image in her shrine, at the kind face of the man who had saved her. "Prepare a diplomatic fleet," she said finally. "I am going to Earth." Korath's eyes widened. "Sovereign, is that wise? Earth is far from our territory. The political implications of a state visit." "I do not care about politics," Velas interrupted. "Not this time. This is personal. This is something I must do." She touched the pendant around her neck. She had worn a replica of her mother's crystal every day since she became sovereign. The original was still with Samuel, she hoped. It was the only connection between them across all those years and light years. "It is time to repay an old debt," she said softly. "It is time to go home." The Valorian diplomatic fleet arrived in Earth orbit on a cold morning in December. 12 great ships hung in the darkness of space, their silver hulls catching the light of the distant sun. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, a display of power that made the governments of Earth very nervous. The president of the United Earth Council was woken from his sleep by urgent calls from his advisors. Generals and diplomats gathered in emergency meetings. No one knew why the Valorian High Sovereign had come. No one knew what she wanted. Velas Kira stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked down at the blue and green planet below. Earth, the birthplace of the species that had saved her. She had never been here before, but she felt a strange connection to this world. "High Sovereign," one of her officers said carefully. "The Earth Council is requesting an explanation for our presence." They seemed quite alarmed. Velas smiled slightly. "Send them a message. Tell them I come in peace. Tell them I am here on a personal matter that has nothing to do with politics or war. Request landing clearance for a small shuttle in the New Boston region." The message was sent. The Earth Council debated for hours. Some wanted to refuse entry to the alien ruler. Some wanted to demand more information. But in the end, they were too afraid to say no. The Valorian Accord was powerful, and no one wanted to start a conflict over something that might be innocent. Landing clearance was granted. Velas did not bring her advisors or her guards with her. She ordered them to stay on the ships. This was something she needed to do alone. She changed out of her official robes and put on simpler clothes, though they were still finer than anything most humans would ever wear. Around her neck, she wore the replica of her mother's pendant. Her shuttle landed at a private facility outside New Boston. The Earth authorities had wanted to give her an official welcome with ceremonies and speeches and cameras. She refused all of it. She asked only for directions to a small bookshop called the Paper Moon. It was raining when Vela stepped out of the shuttle. The sky was gray and the streets were wet. She walked alone through the city, her silver skin drawing curious looks from the humans she passed. Some recognized her from news reports. Some whispered and pointed, but no one approached her. The bookshop was in an old part of the city, on a street lined with small stores and apartments. Vela stood outside for a moment, looking at the faded sign above the door. The Paper Moon, such a simple name for such an ordinary place. She went inside. The shop was warm and smelled of paper and dust. Shelves of old books lined every wall, stacked from floor to ceiling. A small bell rang when the door opened. From somewhere in the back, a voice called out, "I will be with you in a moment." Vela felt her heart beating fast. She recognized that voice. It was older now, weaker, but she recognized it. She walked slowly through the narrow aisles of books. Following the sound, she found him in a back corner, sorting through a box of old paperbacks. Samuel Carter was 83 years old now. His hair was completely white. His back was bent. His hands shook slightly as he worked. But his eyes were still kind, still gentle, still the same eyes that had looked at her with such compassion 30 years ago. He did not notice her at first. He was focused on his work, muttering to himself about which books to keep and which to throw away. Vela stood there watching him, this fragile old human who had changed her life. Finally, he looked up. His eyes widened when he saw her. A Valorian, here in his little bookshop. He had not seen one of her kind since that night on the docks. "Can I help you?" he asked politely. His voice was rough with age. Vela could not speak. All the words she had prepared, all the speeches she had practiced, everything flew out of her mind. She just stood there, looking at him with tears forming in her violet eyes. Samuel frowned slightly. There was something familiar about this Valorian woman, something that tugged at the edges of his memory. The shape of her face, the color of her eyes, the way she looked at him and then he saw the pendant around her neck. His breath caught in his throat. He reached out and grabbed the edge of a shelf to steady himself. His old heart was pounding. It could not be. It was impossible. After all these years, Veleth? He whispered Dot. She nodded, tears now flowing freely down her silver cheeks. "You remember me," she said. Her voice was steady despite her tears. "You remember." Samuel's legs gave out. He sat down heavily on a small stool, his hands shaking. He looked up at this tall, elegant woman who had once been a frightened child hiding behind cargo containers. "I remember," he said. "I never forgot. Not for one day." Veleth knelt down in front of him, just as he had knelt in front of her all those years ago. She took his rough old hands in her smooth silver ones. "Do you know who I am?" she asked. "Do you know what I have become?" Samuel shook his head slowly. "I do not follow the news much. I just work here. I read my books. I do not pay attention to politics." Veleth laughed softly through her tears. Of course he did not know. Of course he had never tried to find out. That was exactly like the man who had helped her without expecting anything in return. "I am High Sovereign of the Valorian Accord," she said. "I rule 12 star systems. I command armies and fleets. I have united my people and built an empire." Samuel stared at her. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "And it is all because of you," Veleth continued. "You saved my life. You gave me hope. You showed me that kindness exists in the universe. Everything I have accomplished, everything I have become, It all started with you and a cup of soup in a cold storage room. Samuel finally found his voice. I did not do anything special. I just helped a child who needed help. Anyone would have done the same. No, Bella said firmly. Not anyone. Not everyone. Most people would have called security. Most people would have looked away. But you did not. You saw me. You cared about me. You gave me everything you had. She reached up and touched the pendant around her neck. I still have the original, she said. The one I gave you. Do you still have it? Samuel nodded slowly. It hangs above my bed. I look at it every night before I sleep. I think about you. I wonder if you are okay. The tears came harder now for both of them. An old human and a powerful alien ruler, crying together in a dusty little bookshop while the rain fell outside. I am okay, Bella said softly. I am more than okay. Because of you. She stood up and helped Samuel to his feet. He was unsteady, and she held his arm to support him. I came here to find you, she said. I came here to thank you. And I came here to offer you something. Samuel looked at her with confusion. Offer me something? I do not understand. Come with me, Bella said. Come to my world. Let me take care of you. Let me give you the finest doctors, the most comfortable home, everything you could ever want. You saved my life. Let me save yours. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. He looked around at his little bookshop, at the dusty shelves and faded books that had been his whole world for so many years. I am just an old man, he said finally. I am nobody. Why would you want me? Velith smiled and squeezed his hand. You are not nobody, she said. You are the most famous human in the Valorian Accord. Children learn your story in school. Philosophers debate your example. You are a legend, Samuel Carter, and I want to know you. Not as a legend, as a person, as the man who saved my life. Samuel looked into her violet eyes. He saw the child she had been and the woman she had become. He saw 30 years of growth and struggle and triumph. He saw something he had never expected to see again. He saw hope. Okay, he said quietly. I will come with you. Velith pulled him into a gentle hug. The most powerful woman in 12 star systems, holding a frail old bookshop worker like he was the most precious thing in the universe, because to her, he was. The news spread across Earth like wildfire. The High Sovereign of the Valorian Accord had come to their planet not for politics or war, but to find a single old man. An old man who had once been a cargo worker. An old man who had given his savings to help an alien child. The story was everywhere. News channels talked about it constantly. People on the streets discussed it with wonder and curiosity. Who was this Samuel Carter? What had he done to deserve such attention from one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy? But Samuel did not care about the news. He was too busy saying goodbye. He went to his small apartment one last time. He looked at the worn furniture, the stacks of old books, the simple life he had built over so many decades. He took the crystal pendant from above his bed and held it in his hands. It still sparkled like it had 30 years ago. Velith came with him. She stood quietly by the door while he gathered his few possessions. She did not rush him. She understood that this was hard. You can bring anything you want, she said gently. Everything. Samuel looked around. There was not much he wanted to keep. Some photographs of his parents, who had died long ago. A few favorite books. The jacket he had given to Velith all those years ago, which she had returned to him at the bookshop. I do not need much, he said. I never did. They left the apartment and walked to the shuttle together. People on the street stopped and stared. Some took pictures. Some called out questions. But Velith's guards kept them back, creating a path for the old man and the sovereign dot at the shuttle, Samuel paused. He looked back at the city where he had spent his whole life. New Boston, with its tall buildings and crowded streets and cargo docks where everything had begun. He had never thought he would leave this place. He had never imagined that anything beyond his small world was possible. "Are you ready?" Velith asked. Samuel took a deep breath. "Yes," he said. "I am ready." They boarded the shuttle together. The doors closed. The engines hummed to life. And Samuel Carter left Earth for the first time in his 83 years. The journey to the Valorian homeworld took several weeks. During that time, Velith and Samuel talked for hours every day. She told him about her life after leaving Earth. She told him about the refugee camps, the war, the struggle to rebuild her civilization. She told him about the debates and the battles and the long years of work. Samuel listened to everything. He asked questions. He showed genuine interest in her story, but he never bragged about his own part in it. He never acted like he deserved credit. "I just gave you a ticket," he said one day. "You did all the hard work yourself." Velith shook her head. "You gave me more than a ticket. You gave me faith. When everyone else in the universe seemed cruel and dangerous, you showed me that kindness existed. That belief kept me going when everything seemed impossible." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled softly. "I am glad," he said simply. "I am glad it helped." The Valorian doctors examined Samuel when they arrived at the homeworld. His health was not good. Years of hard work and poor living conditions had damaged his body. His heart was weak. His lungs were tired. By human standards, he did not have long to live. But Valorian medicine was far more advanced than anything on Earth. The doctors could not make him young again, but they could help him feel better. They could give him more time. They could make his remaining years comfortable and pain-free. Samuel accepted their help gratefully. He had never expected to live a long life. He had never expected anything beyond his small apartment and his simple job. But now, here he was, in an alien palace on a distant world, being cared for by the most powerful people in the galaxy. It was strange. It was overwhelming. But it was also wonderful. Velith gave him rooms in the palace, right next to her own chambers. She visited him every day, sometimes for just a few minutes, sometimes for hours. They talked about everything: books, philosophy, history, the meaning of life, the nature of kindness. Samuel discovered that the little girl he had saved had become a wise and thoughtful woman. She asked difficult questions and listened carefully to his answers. She valued his opinion, even though he was just an old cargo worker with no education or status. "Why did you never try to find me?" she asked one day. "You could have looked for me. You could have asked for help or recognition." Samuel thought about it for a long moment. "It was not about me," he said finally. "When I helped you, I was not thinking about rewards or recognition. I was just thinking about you. A child who was hungry and scared. That was all. Once you were safe, that was enough. I did not need anything else." Velith nodded slowly. "That is why you are special," she said. "That is why your story matters. Because you did good without expecting good in return. That is the purest form of kindness." The months passed. Samuel grew stronger under the care of the Valorian doctors. The pain in his joints faded. His breathing became easier. He had more energy than he had felt in years. He began to explore the palace and the city around it. Everywhere he went, people recognized him. They bowed to him. They thanked him. Children came up to him and asked to touch his hand, like he was some kind of saint. It made Samuel uncomfortable at first. He was not used to attention. He did not know how to handle fame. But slowly, he began to accept it. He began to understand what his story meant to these people. To the Valorians, Samuel Carter was proof that the universe was not entirely cruel. He was evidence that strangers could care about each other. He was hope that different species could live together in peace and kindness. One evening, Velith took Samuel to a great hall where thousands of Valorians had gathered. They were there to see him. They were there to honor the human who had saved their sovereign. Samuel stood on a stage, looking out at the crowd. Their silver faces glowed in the light. Their violet eyes looked at him with respect and gratitude. He felt small and ordinary in front of all these powerful beings. Velith stood beside him and spoke to the crowd in the Valorian language. A translator whispered the words to Samuel so he could understand. "This man saved my life," Velith said. "He gave me food when I was hungry. He gave me shelter when I was cold. He gave me his savings when I had nothing. He asked for nothing in return. He expected nothing in return. He simply saw a child in need and helped her." She turned to Samuel and took his hand. This is what humanity can be at its best. Not powerful ships or advanced technology. Not wealth or conquest. Just simple, stubborn kindness. The belief that no one should suffer alone if we can help them. The crowd began to applaud. The sound washed over Samuel like a wave. He felt tears in his eyes, but he did not try to hide them. "I am not special," he said when the applause faded. His voice was rough with emotion. "I am just an old man who did what anyone should do. I saw a child who needed help, and I helped her. That is all." He looked out at the crowd, at all those alien faces that seemed so different from his own. "But if my story means something to you, then let it mean this. Kindness matters. Small actions matter. You do not have to be powerful or rich or important to make a difference. You just have to care. You just have to try. You just have to see the people around you and choose to help when you can." He paused and looked at Velith, at the woman who had once been a frightened child in his arms. "That is what I did. And look what she became. Not because of me. Because of her own courage and strength and determination. But maybe, just maybe, my small act gave her the chance to become who she was meant to be. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything." The crowd was silent for a moment. Then they began to applaud again, louder than before. Some of them were crying. Some of them were smiling. All of them were looking at this simple old human with something close to love. Samuel Carter lived for 7 more years on the Valorian homeworld. They were the happiest years of his life. He was surrounded by people who cared about him. He was comfortable and healthy. He spent his days reading books and talking with Velith and watching the strange alien sunsets from his balcony. When he finally died, peacefully in his sleep, the entire Valorian Accord mourned. A national holiday was declared in his honor. Schools and hospitals were named after him. His story continued to be told to every generation of Valorian children. And somewhere in the galaxy, a little spark of kindness continued to spread. Because one ordinary human had chosen to help a stranger. Because one small act had changed the course of history. That is the power of kindness. That is the legacy of Samuel Carter. That is what it means to be human at its very best. The end.